Welcome. Thank you for spending time with JC, the literary activist who is changing the world one word at a time. I am speaking with author and publisher Stephana Colbert. Welcome, Stephana.
Thank you so much for having me, JC.
We are in a new age, and we've been talking a lot already off camera about some of the issues facing people of color, Black women specifically. Tell us a little bit about your take on what's been going on.
Well, and I think that it can be today, it can be the last 100 years. I think that one of the things that is troubling, one of the things that is important, I think, is to bring humanness back to African American women.
Yes.
And so I think that what we've done is, because Black women are resilient, because we shoulder burdens without being asked, there's this superwoman characterization. And while the things we accomplish we do accomplish things in extraordinary ways, I think that it takes away to some extent our humanness. People don't just see us as people who hurt and grieve and have joy. And we fall down, we get up, we pray, all of those things. But, there's just this narrow view of us is very myopic in terms of how we're viewed. And I think that what we've seen in the last several months with the protests, the death of Breonna Taylor, some of those things now are coming to the forefront. And so a lot more focus is being placed on African American women, I think. And it can be positive, it can be negative. It just depends on who's telling the story and who is characterizing who we are.
And who controls that narrative, because sometimes we are writing the story, we're acting in the story, we're behind the camera. But when you look at the money that's saying that's the story that will be told, it's still not us.
And that's the reason it's so important that we in our community decide that we're going to control the narrative. I think that's an excellent point. Who controls the narrative? And it often does boil down to, especially in this society, in this country, to dollars and cents. And so therefore, what we see in the press, in the media, on television is narrow because it's being driven by, not by us, but by whoever controls the purse strings. We've got plenty of money in our community. We just need to utilize it in ways that lift us up.
There is opportunity to make a difference now.
I think we have to be thoughtful. We have to critically think about what it is we want to do. We have to be, we don't have to all think the same way or believe everything. It's not a matter of we have to all agree, but I think we have to look at what the circumstances are, look at what our contributions are, and say, okay, now, what do we need to do in order for this to be a better situation for us?
Yes. So tell me, what are you working on now? Let's kind of do a pivot. What are you working on now?
Well, thank you for asking about that. Jewell Jordan Publishing is putting out a second book in a quadrilogy, I guess is the way in which it's 4 books that celebrate African American women. The first book we put out in 2017, Ordinary Extraordinary African American Women, The Elders. And so that celebrated African American women over 70.
Do you have one to hold up?
Yes, and I'll hold it up in just a minute.
Yes, ma'am.
Ordinary Extraordinary African American Women, The Elders.
Excellent.
And this was 10 women, 10 African American women who are over the age of 70. And, they are representative. These are, in each of these books, is a representation of African American women. And the impetus behind it in many ways is our invisibility. We are largely invisible because I think we just do. We don't expect accolades. We don't expect pats on the back. We just do. And so we've been either stereotyped or as you know, the angry black woman, Sapphire. You know, Michelle Obama was characterized on the cover of some magazine in a big afro with an AK-47. You know, it's those are the ways in which the stereotypes of black women occur. And so this is an opportunity to say we're people, we grieve, we hurt, we excel, we overcome, and that kind of thing. And so that was the first book. The inspiration came from one of my friends who it was over 70, and she was here with her husband for an event, and she started talking about her role in the civil rights movement when she was a student at Spelman in the late 50s and early 60s. And it was a fascinating story in terms of her role in it. And I said, gee, I didn't know all of that. You know, you need to, why don't you tell your story? And so her husband said, I've been telling June that. And she said, I don't know. And I said, and the light bulb went on. I said, well, what do you think if somebody else told your story? And she said, I'll think about it. So then after that, I ran into another friend of mine who was an elder, and I asked her if she had a story to tell. And she thought about it, and she said, well, I have a few. And so that was where the idea germinated. And so again, because I think think about hidden figures.
Right.
But for the African-American woman whose father worked at NASA and who began to tell those stories, we wouldn't know about Katherine Johnson and all the other women at NASA. Henrietta Lacks. Right. We wouldn't know about her, the DNA that they basically stole from her. She was never asked about it. So I think that it's important for us to tell our stories. And so the second book is Ordinary, Extraordinary African-American Women, the one we're working on now as we mature. And that is coming out this month. We're going to have, because of the pandemic, we're going to do some virtual book launches. And the first will be, there are 12 women in that book, and the first will be at the end of this month. But these are women between 45 and 69. The third book, which we hope to come out in the next year and a half, is Ordinary, Extraordinary African-American Women, the Millennials. So that's 25 to 44. And then there's a final book, Ordinary, Extraordinary African-American Women as We Begin. And those are young girls and women between 12 and 24. I think we all contribute to who we are as a community. Yes. You know, African-American women clearly play a pivotal, important role. Yes. And so that's what we're working on right now. Getting that book out. That's you know, I'm a writer and I'm a publisher. My effort, we have a couple of books that we hope to get out in the late spring, early summer by other writers, also African-American women. And our effort is just to showcase us, to celebrate us, to make us a more visible part of the society, to show our humanness. We are human beings and should not be characterized in any other way. But I think our humanness is hidden a lot. I think because that's not how we're viewed in this society. I think it very much is hidden, and we have to reclaim it through the written word, through the visual as well. And it would be interesting to see if after you complete your, what did you call it? I call it a quadrilogy. Quadrilogy. If we can lift some of those stories up and make them into movies. Yeah, and I think that somewhere down the line that we hope to be able to do that, because again, I think so much of what our society is today is visual, right? I want us to read. I want us to go back to the point at which we read and think and are thoughtful, but also accept the fact that much of our society is visual. And under those circumstances, if we could put it on film, if we can put it on television, if we can put it in the theater and those kinds of things, I think that, again, it's a way to be seen from a more broad perspective. And I find that oftentimes it's a ping pong because people will watch it and then want the book. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So, and then right now also audiobooks are very big. And it's interesting, the publishing industry has gone through a whole lot in the last, not just because of the pandemic, but I think, just because of who we are, where we are, the economics of things and stuff. And I do understand that audiobooks are a really big deal now. That was true about 15, 20 years ago when you could put the tape in, you were driving down the road and you put, but they've come back. And I'm going to pivot a little bit back to the book. I think the books, especially this book, in spite of everything, these women survived. And there are lots of things that each of them have gone through, personal, professional. There's a woman here who raised an autistic son. There are evidences of just, the corporate glass ceiling. All kinds of obstacles that get in people's way. And in spite of that, these women, they don't just survive, they thrive, right? They thrive. They not only thrive for themselves, but for their families, for their communities, for the people around them. And they recognize racism in its purest form. Each of them has experienced it, but it's not going to stop them from moving forward.
And I think that those are the types of stories that we have to tell, we have to read, we have to see, and we have to hear. And when you look at whether it's Hollywood or just regular mainstream stories, those are the stories that are being told, even if they're fictionalized.
Right.
Those are the stories. They're the stories of triumph over odds and all of that. Those are the stories.
But because fiction is based in reality, right?
Exactly.
Fiction is really based in reality.
Right. It should be, right?
Well, yeah.
Right.
Perhaps our fiction is based in reality.
Fiction. Yes. Yes. Well, I am so happy to have had this time with you. And I am putting in bids for you to come back again, particularly when I start the live show, to invite you right now, because you are marvelous. I love the work you're doing. You're very articulate and you have a lot of good information. Thank you.
Well, that's so sweet of you. Everything that you said, I don't think I deserve all of that, but I have enjoyed this immensely. And I thank you so much again for having me, for inviting me on. And I just applaud you in the forum you have created for the kind of dialogue we've had, for the ability of me to speak and say the things that we've talked about. I think it is invaluable. And so the pat is on your back.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much for listening. Visit me online at jcmoore.net. Follow me on Instagram or Twitter at jcmooreauthor, or look for me on Amazon where you can purchase my books. Remember, you can change the world one word at a time. God bless.